Welcome to INN's Student. INN Student is a platform for law students to come here and deliver a lecture on the topic of their choice. Today we have with us law student Prerna Yagnesh Shah. She is from KC Law College. She is going to speak on competition law in India. So without wasting further time, I would request Prerna to commence with her lecture. Thank you.
Firstly, I would like to thank Advocate Rahul Maskar sir for giving me this opportunity. The topic in discussion today is an important and highly relevant issue in the modern business landscape. How e-commerce platforms in India might be leveraging their dominant market position to gain an unfair advantage and the role of competition law in India addressing these practices. To start off, let us quickly glance through what competition law is and under which act and provisions it is governed. Competition law, also known as antitrust law in many countries, is designed to promote fair competition, prevent monopolies, and ensure the businesses do not engage in practices that harm consumers or stifle innovation. With the rapid growth of e-commerce in India, competition law has become a critical area of concern. Competition law not being defined under any specific law, it was defined in the court in the case of United States versus Philadelphia National Bank as a process that required participants and decentralization. In another case, it had been described as the Magna Carta of free enterprise. The competition law forces the market players to search for better permutation and combination for providing greater profits and enhancing greater efficiency. Let's dig a little deeper into the competition law history. Prior to Competition Act 2002, MRTP Act 1969 incorporated the competition law in a substantial manner. The Act dealt with the concept of monopolistic and restrictive trade practices and subsequently with the unfair trade practices. With the passage of time, it was noticed that the Act's objectives were not achieved to the desired extent. The origin of establishment of new law came into force and was noticed in Finance Minister's budget speech of February 1999. The Competition Act came into enactment in December 2002 and received presidential assent in January 2003. In this lecture, we will delve into an overview of competition law, understanding market dominance in the concept of e-commerce platforms, unfair practices by e-commerce giants, and regulatory responses and enforcement actions in India. Overviewing the competition law in India, India's competition law is governed primarily by Competition Act 2002. The main objective of this act is to promote and sustain competition in market, protect the interest of consumers, and ensure freedom of trade in India. The law is further enforced by Competition Commission of India, also known as CCI, which has the authority to investigate anti-competitive practices and impose penalties where necessary. The Act contains provisions of anti-competitive agreements which are covered under Section 3 of the Competition Act 2002. It mentions different types of agreements which are entered by enterprises which then constitute anti-competitive practices. Abuse of dominant position, which has been covered under Section 4 of the Competition Act 2002, which speaks about various ways in which dominant position of an enterprise is abused. Combinations, which includes merger and acquisitions by enterprises, and that is covered under Section 5 and Section 6 of the Act. Investigation and enforcement, covered under Section 19, talks about the procedure on how the investigation is to be carried out once there is an abuse of dominant position or an anti-competitive agreement is carried out. E-commerce platforms, by their nature, have rapidly become a dominant force in the market, promoting concerns about how their business practices align with the objectives of Competition Act. Let us now dive into understanding market dominance in the e-commerce market. The market dominance refers to a position of significant market power where a company can act independently of competitive forces. In the e-commerce context, dominance can arise through a variety of mechanisms, namely large market share, network chain, access to data. E-commerce platforms like Amazon, Flipkart and other command a significant share of online retail market, ending up with a large market share. These platforms benefit from a large user base that attract more buyers and sellers, creating a feedback loop that increases power, creating a network chain. E-commerce platforms gather vast amount of consumer data which they eventually use to improve their offerings, customize pricing for the consumers and tailored advertisements. Having access to data creates a competitive advantage to the new entrants may struggle to match these. Dominant market players often use their strengths to secure and expand their market position, potentially to determinant of competitors and consumers. Let's now look at the practices that may constitute an abuse of dominant position by these e-commerce giants under the Competition Act. But before we get into this practices, which practices tend to abuse the dominant position, it is also necessary to know that only having a dominant position in the market is not sufficient to constitute a dominant position as an abuse of dominant position. A dominant position, to be called as abuse of dominant position, it has to fulfill some criteria that are mentioned in Competition Act 2002 under section 4 of the same act. It is quite often seen that there is preferential treatment given to certain group of sellers on the e-commerce platforms, giving them an upper hand in using their position to create a dominance in the relevant market. One of such ongoing investigating cases by the CCI is that of ruling e-commerce platforms Amazon and Flipkart, where these platforms are to be alleged of having involved in anti-competitive practices. These investigations indirectly touch on the issue of self-preferencing and market distortion. The next point of discussion is discrimination by the n number of platforms that identify the sellers who are willing to pay a higher price for the same product which can be bought at a lower price, creating a dominant position in the market and abusing the same. E-commerce platforms might enter into exclusive agreements with suppliers or retailers, requiring them to sell only on their platform. This can limit operation of competition and reduce the variety of products available to the consumers on various platforms. Additionally, tying agreements are also to be seen where the consumer has to buy another product mandatorily with the initial product. These are called as bundled products, also negatively which impacts the prevailing competition. It has been also noticed that small competitors are pushed out of the market by the e-commerce giants as they engage in below cost pricing to capture the market by use of predatory pricing technique. This type of loss leader pricing tends to be harmful to smaller sellers, pushing them out of the competition and giving a restraint to new entrants. The last point that we will now cover is the regulatory responses and enforcements. done to deal with the anti-competitive practices. The Competition Commission of India plays a critical role in addressing issues arising from abuse of dominance in the e-commerce sector. While CCI has acted in the past by investigating complaints against dominant players in the market, challenges exist in fully regulating digital markets due to their rapidly growing nature. Several high-profile cases have been filed with the CCI, including Amazon and Flipkart investigation. There have been ongoing investigation into the business practices of Amazon and Flipkart, especially concerning with preferential treatment to certain sellers and price discrimination. They are tend to be seen doing price manipulation for their consumers. CCI has the power to issue penalties and cease and desist orders for the anti-competitive practices held by these companies. The e-commerce policy in India, which is still being drafted, aims to better regulate these platforms by focusing on transparency, data protection, and fair business practices. Draft E-commerce Rules 2021 propose measures like ensuring equal treatment of sellers, clearer disclosure of discounts and offers, and banning fraudulent reviews. These can address some of the unfair practices by platforms. Let us go through a few case laws to understand the working of CCI while dealing with abuse of dominance in the by the e-commerce giants. CCI's investigation of Amazon and Flipkart case 2020. It is one of the most high-profile investigations into the e-commerce sector, as it has that was initiated by Competition Commission of India against Amazon and Flipkart. The investigation revolves around allegations that these platforms were engaging into anti-competitive practices that favored certain sellers over others and caused harm to smaller sellers in their platforms. The background of the case goes like, it was included that smaller sellers and retailers accused Amazon and Flipkart of favoring preferred sellers, promoting private labels at the expense of third-party vendors. These practices were believed to have facilitated by preferential listing, misleading discounting practices, and other forms of anti-competitive behavior. The core issue was whether these platforms were using their dominant position to distort the competitive process, thereby exploiting their power to detriment of fair competition. The key allegations in this area are preferential treatment, discounting practices offered, private label products being promoted unfairly while pushing third-party vendors down the search ranking. The CCI, after investigating, decided to pursue the matter and launched a detailed probe into the conduct of Amazon and Flipkart under Section 4 of the Competition Act 2002. The case is still pending and it is closely monitored, as it could set an important precedent for future cases in digital market space. This case underscores the evolving concerns about platform neutrality and fairness in how e-commerce giants treat third-party sellers, particularly when their own private label product compete directly with the third-party vendors. Another such case is Indian National Congress versus Google. Although not specifically about e-commerce platforms, the Google case is critical because it deals with dominance in digital market and offers blueprint for how cases involving online giants might unfold in India. The background of this particular case is that the Indian National Congress has filed a complaint against Google for abusing its dominant position in the search engine market. The complainant argued that Google had been manipulating search results to prioritize its own services over others. The case, the case involved the question of whether Google's control over search results and advertising space was stifling competition from rival search engines and advertising platforms. The key issues in this case were search manipulation, that Google was accused of placing its own services such as Google Shopping above other competitors in search preferences. And the other allegation was anti-competitive practices carried out by Google, like prioritizing its advertisement network and placing biased content in its search results. The outcome of this case went as the CCI investigated Google and found that its practices did indeed amount to an abuse of its dominant position. Google was fined and corrective actions were taken. This case showed how Competition Commission of India was willing to address dominance in digital market space. Even in non-e-commerce platforms and sectors like search engines, it highlighted the market dominance in digital space and needed to be closely scrutinized. E-commerce platforms dominate market, creating significant economic implications. New entrants face high barriers due to the hefty market cost, data advantages, and network effects that favor established players like Amazon and Flipkart, leading to winner takes it all dynamics. While consumers benefit from lower prices and broad range of products, dominance can harm consumer welfare through price manipulation, limited choices, and reduced innovation as smaller competitors struggle to survive. Sellers, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, often face high commission fees, and platforms can use their consumer data to undercut or copy successful products, leaving sellers with limited control and forcing them to accept unfavorable terms. Global competition law is evolving in response to the dominance of e-commerce platforms. The European Union approach has led to efforts with its Digital Market Act targeting gatekeeper platforms like Amazon and Google, and its General Data Protection Regulation to safeguard consumer data. In contrast, the US adopts a more hands-off approach, intervening only when clear consumer harm is evident. As seen in an investigation in Amazon's data practices, other countries such as Australia and South Korea have introduced stricter regulations to promote transparency, protect small vendors, and prevent misuse of consumer data by dominant platforms. As e-commerce evolves, future competition law and regulation may see more proactive enforcement, with authorities like India's CCI taking targeted action to ensure fair competition in the international market as well. International cooperation will become crucial as regulators work together across the borders to address anti-competitive agreements and practices, potentially aligning India's laws with those of the European Union and other regions. Additionally, regulators will need to balance fostering innovation with maintaining fairness, ensuring that both entrepreneurial growth and consumer welfare are protected in the evolving digital market. In conclusion to today's session, e-commerce platforms hold enormous power in today's digital economy. While they drive innovation and consumer convenience, their market dominance can sometimes lead to anti-competitive practices. Competition law needs to balance balance market innovation and consumer welfare while ensuring that no player, regardless of size, can undermine competition or exploit consumers unfairly. India's Competition Act provides a robust framework for investigating and regulating such practices. But given the speed at which e-commerce evolves, continuous scrutiny and policy adaptation will be essential. As businesses, legal professionals, and regulators, it is crucial to stay ahead of these trends to ensure a competition and a fair and consumer friendly market. Thank you.
Prerna, thank you very much. It was nice hearing from you the competition law, the various dimensions, various concepts, and you have nicely explained what is the law in India, and also you have given the examples as to how globally this particular law is growing now. So thank you very much. A small token from Hammurabi to you.